That's really well said. Kieran, let's go to your time abroad with your family, a year away in the French Riviera. I've already heard a bit about this, but I want to hear it again, and I know everyone's eager to hear about this. So tell us, what led you to do this?
Yeah, it was such an incredible year that we feel very, very grateful for. Definitely, I've already mentioned some of the burnout issues, the health issues. For us as a family, we had always been interested in travel and getting that experience for our children. We had unfortunately been blocked by COVID as we had initially planned our first big trip at that time, kind of waiting for our youngest to get to an age we felt like we could travel. So I think that was also part of the impetus. And luckily enough for us, we had the build out of having the financial freedom and known that. And in retrospect, we had looked back and said this was a big part of why we wanted to be financially free, was to have the ability to make choices that were significant and dramatic to alter, our path in life if we felt like we needed to. And at that moment in time, I think I really needed to. So that was a big part of the motivation. It definitely helped that I had a friend who had actually done something similar, and I was living vicariously through him while I was experiencing this burnout significantly, seeing the beautiful scenery of the French Riviera and Nice, and so he helped convince me in saying, this is something to do right now. And similarly, at that time, I was also reading the Die with Zero book, which I know a lot of people are familiar with in the
I'm
personal
reading
finance
that
world.
right now, Kieran. I'm at the halfway point, and it is reshaping the way I think about things.
Yeah, definitely. And this idea that there's certain times in life that you can do certain experiences and then it might not be there later was something that really rang true with me. And it felt like we quickly turned from how can we do it to a why not situation. And every single time we looked at why not, it was something that, this was something we were going to end up doing no matter what.
So, given everything you talked about just before this, the stress, the burnout, maybe you can just shed some light on what did this trip, this time away, not working, not doing medicine, this time away with your family, what did this do for you in terms of you resetting as an individual? And then what did it do for you just deepening the connections with your family?
It's funny, as I was getting ready for this, I was thinking back and in that very beginning stage of the excitement of the sabbatical, right? You're getting to this phase where you're in this beautiful new place. There's a lot of adventure that you're thinking of having, and you're also this type A personality who immediately thinks, I have all this time now. I'm not working. I have all this freedom during the daytime when the kids are gone. And that type A-ness came out immediately with goal orientation. Oh, what kind of exercise challenges can I take on? What is the next thing that I can learn? What books am I going to read? I even went and started thinking I'll do some creative writing. And it took a bit of a moment to say, wait a second, these are the things that got me into this in the first place, this type A.
Yeah.
And then I realized I'm in this place for 1 year and will probably not have an opportunity like this. Let's learn to be present. This is a muscle that needs to be built that I don't have, that idea of having presence in life. So the thing that I really learned the most that year was that ability to push off any degree of feeling like I needed to complete something and to challenge myself and build myself out more as an individual and instead build that muscle of presence. And being in a beautiful setting with wonderful food and wonderful culture, it makes it easier to do that. So I think it really helped me to bring that into my life. And that was very helpful, I think, in the family setting as well. I think my children felt that as soon as they came home, I was there and I was listening and I was active and trying to learn French along with them as best I could, despite my horrible accent, as they've reminded me regularly. So yeah, that was an element that I don't think I appreciated would be as valuable as it was. I couldn't have known until after the fact.
Okay, it sounds like that year away, you learned about the power of being present in the moment. Karen, this is something I talk about a lot and something I've been learning about over the years. And I have to tell you, I still struggle with it. And I constantly need to remind myself that each and every moment I experience with my kids and my wife, Seema, each moment is precious and it deserves my full attention. That's one thing I continually try to tell myself. The other thing I try to do now in order to be more present is I will go for walks in the neighborhood when I want to take a break and recharge, but I'll make sure I don't have my headphones in. I'll make sure I'm not constantly bombarding myself with something new to learn. Those are just two things that I do, but I still struggle with being present. So maybe can you give us some actionable tips on maybe things that you do to be more present every day?
Yatin, I think I just told you this muscle was so weak in me to begin with that again, you're asking me as if I'm some authority on this dynamic and I'm going to actually
I
give people some good advice here. But no, I think when you start realizing the value that accrues from being present, that's such a positive self-reinforcing dynamic. I, like you, had listened to podcasts, read in different settings that talks about creating that space for yourself is a highly valuable thing. But again, as somebody who is goal oriented and at the time previously was incredibly time constrained, you always can convince yourself that it's not quite the right time to do that. You have many other things on the plate to take up your time. I realized that in that present moment, you have some of the best creative thoughts that you can have. A lot of the self-reflection that I was able to put myself through to have the ability to talk about today, in some of these areas that I've grown in is because of that presence, giving yourself time, and that self-reflection. And going back further to the setting of, talking about the value of kids and the value of our presence in their lives, I found that having those moments, we put them through a significant challenge. My kids had some challenging moments without a doubt, one more so than the other three. But being able to take the time in the morning as I was walking, as you said, without headphones, thinking through what they were experiencing, thinking about what I would want to do as a parent in that setting when I was going to sit down with them, not feeling stressed about what I had to do later in the day, to be very calm and listen. I had some incredible outcomes with my son who said, you know what, Dad, like these conversations have been super helpful for me. At the tail end of the year, he was saying, I feel like after navigating these challenges, I can do just about anything. I have a lot of
Wow.
confidence now. And
Wow.
as a parent, it's so reinforcing to hear that. It makes you see the value in it. So I think when you get that positive reinforcement around giving yourself time, giving yourself presence, it now makes you realize, okay, I'm not letting this thing go anymore.
I think that in itself, Kieran, that is so beautiful, so powerful. That probably made the whole trip worthwhile in itself. I want to ask you, what did you learn about our most precious resource, time, in your year away?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of the areas where I would say time had value, that space and presence that having extra time gives. The other thing was going back to the concept of die with zero. It's the idea of time in the right setting is also very, very important. I had the luxury of in that time away, my parents and friends and family were able to visit. And I definitely noticed with my parents, there was an element where, although they were really enjoying the trip, there was limitations on what they were able to do physically at some points in our travels. And so getting that freedom of time to be able to do the things that you want to experience in life in the right setting was highly valuable for me and made it more present in my mind that I got to create this space while I have the ability. I think in our last conversation, we were talking about that idea that I always knew but let slip away, where, the quote is 75% of your time that you're going to spend with your child is there by the age of 12, and then 90% is by the time they're 18. And so to have that ability to reflect that this time I have right now is incredibly valuable, is some of the limited time I'm going to have for this experience in life, and making space for it is our most important things. Having that abundance of time on the sabbatical helped me again realize, the value in these things, and then making sure I carve out the right settings to have my experiences that are most valuable to me.
And Kieran, in your year away, what were your some of your favorite highlights?
It's hard to pinpoint one. Obviously we were very lucky that the French school system. So my kids were in the French public school system while they were there, and there was the what I call the daytime when they were at school. So my wife and I really got a chance to enjoy the French culture, enjoying different cuisine. Very quickly felt like we could be part of the society there, where we made friends at the school, and through competitive sports, I was able to join a badminton team that they
That's amazing.
asked me to join, and I basically got to compete and go around to different areas in the south of France to compete on weekends with them.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that really, I had a chance to experience living in a different culture. So that was highly valuable for both myself and my wife, and then for the kids to just get a chance to experience a totally different culture and remove themselves from their bubble, right? Like, kids can often get this little microcosm of their school and think this is the only way that the world operates, and this is my truth of what's happening in my life. And they came to a different setting, and none of those things were actually the same in the French school system, right? So it was very eye-opening to them, along with the dynamic of the travel and the experience of what we got to see in the different places we did. The school system there has this idea of 6 weeks of school and then 2 weeks vacation, which allowed us to build in these little mini trips all throughout Europe along the way. So that experience for them of just experiencing the history that's rich in Europe, the beautiful scenery and architecture was just incredible for the family.
Any general tips, Kieran, for anybody else who's maybe considering a year away with their family?
Yeah, I think it's something that first off, takes a lot of planning. I don't think this should be something that's done on a whim, especially if you're thinking of going for any length of time, like a year. I think if you're going to do a 1 month or a 2 month stint, you can probably do it a little bit on more short notice. But it was a significant effort to build out the plan to get them into the French public school system and get long stay visas and whatnot. So we gave ourselves about a year to go through the process of planning this out because of the fact that I took the time to reflect on where I was at personally. I think understanding your why you're doing it is also really important because the difficulties to make this thing happen and ensure the year goes forward in the way you want, you're going to come across a lot of hurdles along the way. And so I think if you have a strong reason why you're making that decision as a family, will help as well. Obviously, turning to the finance side of things, the budgeting aspect of thing is important. You have to really plan out how you're going to do this, how much you need to save, and talk to your accountant about the planning. It turned out the timing for us happened to be in such a way where it did fall in 6 months and 6 months into each of our fiscal financial years, which actually helped quite a bit to balance out kind of a total loss of income for a full fiscal year would have looked very different in terms of how the tax dynamics work. So I would recommend people think about that if they're trying to figure out their timing. And the last one would be what you're going to do with your home. Assuming you have a home that you have to manage while you're away, we felt very fortunate. We ended up paying a little bit more on the property management side, but it was something that we really truly felt like there was no headache in terms of what was happening with our house when it was being rented. And I thought that was highly valuable because I've heard of people having horrible experiences when they go away. If they
Yeah.
try to just maximize the total amount of rent that they can get, which obviously you want to do to some degree because you're about to take on this significant expenditure, but then they had a lot of headaches along the way. So those would be some of the tips I would take on. Lastly, for us, there was a lot of concern about taking your children out of whatever activities they're in, or potentially would this negatively affect their schooling. For us, a big reason why we chose France is our kids were in French immersion, so it felt like no matter what happens academically, they're going to come away with a strong language aspect of things. So thinking through that pros and cons for what you do on the children front is a highly valuable thing too.
Kieran, that's really thoughtful. I'm just curious. So you live outside of Vancouver in BC. How do you compare the cost of living where you are in Canada to where you were in the French Riviera?
The French Riviera in Nice is definitely not one that you would expect to be an affordable place to live in any way, stretch, or means.
Hmm.
Specifically, the housing cost and the rental cost is your biggest expense for most people when they go to visit, because typically you're going at the high tourist season. But you'd be surprised that it's actually a very affordable place to live on aggregate. And when I say that, it's compared to a high cost of living setting in Vancouver. We found overall on our day-to-day living, after you took away the cost of the housing, it was something that we were living more cheaply in general than we would have in Vancouver. Cost of food was reasonable when going shopping. Cost of public transport was reasonable. And despite not really having we were privately funded for healthcare, the healthcare costs were incredibly reasonable as well. So overall, it caught me off guard to some degree at how reasonably affordable it was to manage there.
Now that you have this incredible experience under your belt, I'm really curious, Karen. Would you guys down the road one day consider living somewhere else other than Canada?
You know, in the reflection as we were leaving Nice, it was, we didn't really miss home because we knew we were going to be coming back after the year. That was kind of ironclad in our position that we were definitely coming back. Work had given us this break, but we needed to be back at a certain time. But it felt like we were mourning this. Had built a community there and built friends and built a life where the kids were, upset to leave as well at the same time. And to think of it as just an extended vacation that we were never going to experience again was something that left us feeling, wrong inside. It didn't feel correct. So I think it's going to have a special place in our heart always. And we've actually already mentally committed that we are going to get back there. We've tentatively scheduled off March of 2026 to just go back and get to see our friends again, because that'll build that relationship further and experience. I think that we know that our place is in Canada. As a physician, we practice here. It wouldn't be easy to practice anywhere else. And I think we love our community that we live in. But that area of the world is in a retirement setting is something that is definitely elevated in our minds as a place that we would want to be.